Can you hear me? Mic test. Good? We're good? Right. Hello, Wonderfruit. Wow. Guys, it's only 4 o'clock. Hello, Wonderfruit. Awesome. Okay, so thank you for having me. This is the first time actually I'm giving a talk abroad. I'm from Manila, Philippines. Anyone here from Manila? Oh, awesome. Oh, nice. Great, great. Thank you for showing that spirit. Um, so right today, I'm supposed to talk about love, or at least aligned to love. Okay. Now I'm gonna talk about a different kind of love, and it's more of the wild kind, not the type that you're used to, but it's more for animals. So let me ask people for a little interaction. May I ask what is your favorite animal that's non-domesticated? You, sir. Non-domesticated. Yeah. Sure. Great. Anyone from here? Favorite animal? Non-domesticated. So no dogs, no birds, no. Well, at least. Sorry. Crocodile. Andy. Perfect person.
Oceanic white-tip shark.
Same. Same. Okay. Have you guys heard of the vaquita? Have you heard of pangolins? Okay. How about southern resident killer whales? Okay. So these are, I would say, the less charismatic animals. And there is actually a reason why you don't know about them, and that is the crux of what I do. Next, please. So my presentation is called Capturing the Wild. Next. And I am a conservation and wildlife photographer. It didn't come easy. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do when I was little, but it is what I'm doing now. Okay. So next, please. Now, I started off as a television commercial director, so I will be telling you a series of stories. This is basically the best way I know how to explain such complex issues, right? So what we have here are Treasure Tales, Seaworthy Man, Student of the Sea, and Nanook in the North. Okay, so let's start with Treasure Tales. Okay. So Treasure Tales is all about photographing sharks in the Philippines. The thing about sharks, and I love them so much, is that they are the perfect example for conservation photography. It is not very easy to have people love or like sharks. We've all watched Jaws. We've all watched Sharknado. That was so much fun to watch, but I hated it deep inside, but I loved it. So it's very, very hard to get people to love sharks. When Jaws came out, that movie and that book basically scared people shit out of the water, and it was very difficult to have them care for sharks again, right? Next, please. So it all began with this photo. Can anyone name the species of shark? Except Andy. Thresher, great. Have you seen a thresher shark? Okay. So, so this photo is a shark getting close to two divers. Now, in the spirit of love, that girl with the camera is actually my ex. So, she's immortalized in my presentation, right? So, when I took this photo in 2015, it got shared on the official fan page of the Philippines. And it got a lot of comments, a lot of likes. And one particular comment came out. And this is in Tagalog, so I will roughly translate. Maybe the shark is full, that's why it wasn't attacking the two divers. For sure, God is good. And me, this was a time when there weren't any trolls yet in Facebook. So I endeavored to actually comment on every single comment that I saw on that photo. So I told that person, it was actually an old woman, I told her, not all sharks are bad. In fact, it's a big bias against them that sharks are labeled as such. They're not mindless killers. But it was very, very, very difficult to take a photo of this particular shark. I had to hold my breath underwater. I had to hide behind corals and wait for that perfect moment for that thresher shark to come close. It's very, very, shy. The shark is very shy, very skittish. And the moment it got close to me, took my camera out, 3 seconds was all I had, and the shark disappeared. Why? Primarily because they feel that, we expel bubbles underwater, so that is alien to them. And I had to explain that. So I had to go through many steps before that person realized and commented that, next please, thank you, I learned something. There are shy sharks too. And this is the perfect example of conservation photography. The point of my photos, I realized on that moment, was to start discussions, to start dialogues. I don't mean to turn everyone into lovers, advocates for shark. That's not going to happen. But at least have that discourse needed for these important topics. So over the next few years, next please, I started taking photos and considered conservation photography as my calling. So what is conservation photography? It opens individual's mind to a cause or idea, initiates dialogue and discourse through the use of a compelling, beautiful image. That's basically it in a nutshell. Next. So it's photography, of course, with a purpose. Next, please. So this is the closest I've ever been to a thresher shark. That was probably an arm's length away, right? Very, very shy with those big eyes. Next. And then I started just taking photos of it. Next, please. This is a white-tip reef shark. A smaller version of the oceanic white-tip's cousin, my favorite shark as well. Next, please. And this is a photo of them sleeping. No. It's funny because when I posted this, I got a lot of comments. I thought sharks had teeth. Actually, they do, but it's just not as big as the great whites that you're used to. Next, please. Of course, the cousins of the sharks would be the rays, right? And this is a marble ray in Tubataha. Has anyone been to Tubataha? Diving in Tubataha? Okay, great. You can come with me next year. Next. And I also now started working with shark scientists. So this is them basically implanting an audio device, an audio tag to the shark so that when it goes around, next please, they can track where it goes. So these are the receivers. So that thing that we put in the shark makes us a subsonic ping, right? The shark doesn't hear it, but when it emits and it passes one of those detectors, receivers, we get to track where the shark's behavior, where it goes around into Bataha. Next. Okay. Over the course of this talk, I will also be showing links and to photographers that I admire. The thing about conservation is it's a very, very niche type of photography. And in terms of followers, we are not as, let's say, charismatic, because we touch on very, very touchy or contentious issues, right? So we try to promote each other. So this is, if you have Instagram, follow Thomas Peshak. He's one of my favorite National Geographic photographers for sharks. Next, please. Right, but it didn't start outright when it comes to conservation photography. So this is me in Coron. I was free diving, which is the best way actually to photograph sharks because you don't expel bubbles. You get to get closer to them. My love for wildlife and conservation and sharks in general didn't start when I was little, as I said. Before, when I was really, really young, I wanted to be a director. I wanted to do films. I love George Lucas's films, the original trilogy, just that one. I don't like the rest. And I wanted to be like him. I wanted to have my own Lucasfilm and everything. So when I was in high school, at third year high school, my love for it was so strong, I started my own company at third year high school. So I stopped going to school in the mornings. I told my mom I was sick. Obviously, she saw through me. I was lying through my teeth. And I started it, and 20 years later, I had my own company. And then I started directing. And then WWF came up to me and said, hey, can you direct a documentary on climate change? It's like, of course. What do you know about climate change? Nothing, but I'll learn it. That was my passion back then. So they took me to Tubataha and I started diving. And I started taking photos. And next thing you know, I resigned as director. And this is now what I do full time. And when I give this talk to graphic design or art schools, I always tell them that your love for something, your passion for something isn't set the moment you feel it. It could evolve. When I was younger, I hated photography. I felt like, because cameras were so accessible that anyone can be a photographer. I had that feeling that I was, as a director, my skill set was higher. Well, look at me now. I'm the photographer, right? And I hate directing right now. I absolutely hate video, but I still have to do it because it's a perfect medium. But that's basically how it went. Probably 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that I would be here giving this talk about sharks. Next, please. Okay, so thing is, I always ran by this moniker called Student of the Sea. Why? I started taking photos 2014. That was 5 years ago. I was 32. I entered the industry late. I don't have any marine biology background. I never studied photography professionally. So I always considered myself as a student of the sea. And every time I went out to take photos, every time I went out with shark scientists, conservationists, I was learning. And I considered myself student of the sea. 5 years later, I realized that my calling was to make more students of the sea. And that's what I'm doing now by giving this talk. No, as I give talks to schools, as I teach in universities, as I even through the captions that I have on my Instagram posts, I feel like I am already educating or at least starting conversations. So how do I do it? It's very hard to get someone into conservation or at least feel that love for environment. Next, please. You have to start with the familiar. No, everyone knows this particular species of fish. Anyone? More popularly known by the name. There you go. So it was very fascinating to see so many people interested in the sea after that film came out. The only problem is people started getting the actual fish from the sea and taking it as pets. But I digress. Right. So we have to start with something familiar and start inviting people closer and closer into what we feel are the most important. Next, please. Dolphins are the most charismatic animals and most popular, I would say, marine life when I give talks. You know, so the thing about being a photographer, an underwater photographer, is that you become an ambassador for the sea. You know, I liken underwater photography to a long distance relationship. Who here has ever been on a long distance relationship? Awesome. So what is the most important thing about a long distance relationship? How do you keep it alive? Good. What else? Trust. How about visibility? Or at least presence. Right? Because when you're out of sight, you're out of mind. Right? Absence makes the heart go wander, probably. So that's why I liken it to a long distance relationship. Because what happens beneath the surface is something that we rarely see. And that's my job, to show that to everyone, to show you what happens underwater. How many divers do we have here, by the way? Ah, cool. Hey, Kat. Right, next. And this is a photo of Tubataha in all its glory. The coral reef is obviously the most important or the most complex, I guess, subject that I always take on when I take photos underwater. Next. These are wolf snappers in Palau, feeding. The thing here is, it's so funny because there were around 30 divers in this particular dive spot, but there were mantas all around them. Thing is, no one was noticing the less charismatic animals, and this is usually how I transition from the sharks, from the dolphins, from the mantas, and slowly to the more obscure species. Thanks. Of course, I like giving personalities to my subjects. This guy was actually feeding, and he was throwing me some shade because I was disturbing him. That was there. This is in Balikasag Island in Bohol. Next, please. And I try to demonstrate the interaction between marine life and photographers or divers in general. I try to educate them on what to do or what not to do when underwater. I always tell them not to touch. It's very, very tempting to touch the shell of a turtle. I've done it a few times. I partly regret it. But obviously, you shouldn't do it. Next. And then I try to encourage what we call citizen science. So people would always tell me, "Okay, I love you're converting me now. You're turning me into an ocean defender, ocean lover. But what can I do? There is only so much that I can do, especially if I'm not a diver." Now, if you notice those spots on the side of the shark, those are very unique to each individual, just like fingerprints. So, sharks. We take a photo of the side of the sharks, not this side, the opposite side, the left side, and we catalog the different individuals that pass through a certain location, right? Now, that is where citizen science comes in. So when we have divers in Tubataha or somewhere else, we tell them, please take a photo of the left side of the whale shark and then upload it to a database so we can track them. Okay, next. Same thing with mantas. Those dots are unique to each individual. There are two types of mantas. You have the oceanic and you have the reef manta. You would know that it's a reef manta if the dots are in between the gills, and then it's an oceanic if it's outside the gills. So that's also one way. So we take pictures and we catalog, and then that goes into a database. Next, please. And of course, sharing the wonder of the underwater scenery is something else. This is a photo I took in 2018 that is now, next, in the airport of NAIA Terminal 2 in Aquino International Airport. So earlier in the slide, you saw my ex with the shark. This is my wife. So it's, hey, victory. Not the same person, okay? Just to make clear. So there's love there. Okay, next. And of course, plastic. Who here recognizes the plastic pollution problem? Raise of hands. Awesome. Okay. Taking pictures of plastic is something that is eye-opening for me. Because for a diver, you already know that plastic has very adverse effects underwater. But when you go to local communities, they don't know that. They think that just because it's labeled recyclable, biodegradable, that it's okay to use it. So I use my photos now to spread awareness about plastic. Next, please. So this is a photo I took earlier this year that went viral globally. It was shared by National Geographic. It was also on front pages around the globe in Spain, in Netherlands, in France. And this is a photo of a crab stuck in a plastic cup. What was fascinating about this was there is the brand there. Now, it was interesting how the discussion went when it came to this photo. The first response that I got was, the reason that happened is because of human behavior. People are not throwing their trash properly. But the thing is, the ironic thing about it is, even if you do, in the Philippines at least, if you throw a particular plastic cup in, let's say, a recycling bin, we don't have in that country the facilities or the technology to actually recycle it. And since 1955, only 9% of all plastic ever produced in the world has been recycled. That is the truth of it. So even if we do dispose of our trash properly, it will still end up somewhere, whether it's on a landfill, whether it's in the ocean, or wherever. That's the truth of it. So the thing is, what do we have to do to address that? Well, we want to, number one, hold the companies that are responsible to stop using plastic. What's a good alternative to plastic? Plastic cups, at least. Sorry? Reusable, perfect. I had an answer before that said paper cups. Paper cups are actually plastic lined, so it's the same deal. What you have to remember, and that's what I love about Wonderfruit, is that the solution to the plastic problem is actually refill, reuse, right? Because even if you say, you know what if we use glass? But the problem is not the material, it's actually the mindset. What I've learned through Greenpeace is that we should distance ourselves from that throwaway mentality. Just because we can use it and throw it again, that's what's going to happen. Next. So took photos of everything from fish with a toothpaste container. Next, please. This was actually new. It was a spaghetti sauce in a sachet. Next. More. Next, please. And of course, 41% of all plastic underwater is actually made up of nets. They're called ghost nets. These are nets that were discarded by fishermen, and they continue to indiscriminately kill dolphins, sharks, turtles, and by drowning. So that's usually what happens. Next. But at the same time, your love for the sea should also include the communities that depend on it. So this is actually the story of a father and a son. Next, please. Who used to be who used to be illegal fishermen, but were introduced to an alternative type of livelihood, which is farming seaweed. Next. There. So they basically farm seaweeds and dry them on those platforms. Next. Right. Next, please. Okay, so those are the seaweeds that interestingly enough, if you ever encounter any of those seaweed farms, please do not jump into it because when I did, apparently, they're hosts to those eggs of jellyfish. That was probably the most uncomfortable dive I've ever had. Next. Okay, and this is the wife and the brother farming the seaweeds. Next, please. Next. There. So in the Philippines, usually it's a family affair. The kids take part in the whatever the parents are doing. Next. And they dry them and they sell for much more than what they would usually get when they fish. Next, please. Okay. This is no ordinary rice field. This is a rice field that's actually salt water resistant. So the thing with climate change that we don't realize is that when sea levels rise, they actually enter the lowlands and usually flood rice paddies. So in coordination with ADB, Asian Development Bank, this particular farmer was able to get his hands on the saltwater resistant rice. So it affects not just the communities that are beside water. Next, please. And this is a sanctuary for giant clams, which are endangered as well. Next. And then you have coral propagation. Next. So, next please. So the typical nature photograph shows a butterfly on a pretty flower. The conservation photograph shows the same thing, but with a bulldozer coming in in the background. Next. This doesn't mean that there's no room for beautiful pictures. In fact, we need beautiful images just as much as the issues. It does mean that the images exist for a reason, to save the earth while we still can, or at least in its current state. Next. So this was said by Joel Sartori, which is the photographer behind the photo art. He took photos of all endangered or at least close to endangered animals. Next, please. So another photographer I look up to is Christina Mittermeier, and she's also a National Geographic photographer. Her specialty is of communities also that depend on, normally it's the forest or in ocean resource. Next. My last story is called Nanook in the North. I actually saw that polar bear with a dog. That was in Churchill in Manitoba. So in Churchill, Manitoba, you have Eskimo dogs, that particular dog. There are over 300 of them, and they're just chained outdoors, and they thrive in the harsh, harsh weather. It was, I think, minus 15 when I was there, and they were panting. Being Asian from the Philippines, I was freezing my ass off. And these dogs were just chill. Now, the reason why those dogs do not attack the polar bears or the polar bears don't attack those dogs is because the polar bears associated that area with food. So whenever the caretaker comes in and feeds them chicken meal, fish meal, the polar bears take part in it too. So that's why it was sort of an artificial ecosystem that thrived. Next, please. So I went there to take poignant photos. I wanted to take photos of how climate change was actually affecting one of the most vulnerable ecosystems known to man, and that is the subarctic or the Arctic. Next, please. So I took photos of polar bears and sold them as art. So in an effort, to amplify the message through the images that I've taken. So we were very lucky to see a mom and a cub in our first try. Next. And this is probably the closest I've been to the bear. What you don't see in this photo is actually there was a dog beside him. It's too bad I didn't get it, but that was cool. Next. Okay. Now, I want to show you these series of photos. Now, in Churchill and Manitoba, there are so many bears, mainly because the ocean there, the seawater there freezes much earlier than any body of water in that particular area, mainly because it has fresh water. So there is this particular polar bear that we noticed that was patrolling around the dump site of the town. Now, the thing is, the town has these bear traps around it. Basically, there's seal meat inside. Next. So they usually attract the bears to dissuade them, or at least to redirect them from going into the town itself. Next. And we actually caught a polar bear getting caught in the trap. Next, please. Okay. Play. Okay. Play back, please. This one. Okay. So as I was taking a video, a time-lapse video, this particular polar bear was attracted by my action camera, and he started playing with it. And you really can't ask for more. So polar bears have very, very keen sense of smell. They can smell a seal or prey from a kilometer out, and they can smell them from 3 feet deep. And he probably smelled me on that camera, and that's what happened. And yeah, I'm never letting go of that tripod again. Okay, next please. Right, and of course, one of the more famous photographers for National Geographic is Paul Nicklin, and he specializes on Arctic wildlife. Next. Right, okay. So one thing I tell photographers normally is I leave them with 2 numbers, sets of numbers. Next, please. 15, 15, 15, and 20, 60, 20. So normally we take photos and we bring cameras with us when we travel. Next, please. Okay. All right. So what does this mean? 15, 15, 15. Next, please. It just means that you divide your 1 hour into 4. So when you take photos of wildlife, you try to have a particular setting for each quarter hour. So whether you're shooting with a zoom lens, whether you're shooting with vertical or horizontal, you divide it so that you can maximize the photos or the subject that you have with you. Next. Okay, next. 20, 60, 20 is something that I teach them when it comes to breaking through a plateau, your creative plateau. Next. So normally when I take photos, the first 20%, I learned this from Paul Nicklin, whatever you're tasked to do, make it sharp and in focus. Once that's done, for the next 60%, you push your ability. You know, you experiment, you break out of your comfort zone and you try something very, very different. And lastly, on the last 20%, you experiment and you go wild. That's usually where the growth comes out. You know, that's where you grow as a photographer. And if you have Instagram, you can follow me, Noel Guevara Photo, and I usually focus my advocacy there, right? So that's where I normally post, and that's where I usually broadcast my travels and the species that I interact with. After this, I'll be flying to Chiang Mai to take photos of elephants. Elephants in a sanctuary. Apparently, not all sanctuaries are sanctuaries, legit sanctuaries. So that's one thing I want to explore. Next. Okay, so before I play this video, at the end of it, normally high school students or university students are telling me, you know what, I want to do this. I want to stop schooling and I want to go out and volunteer or take photos myself. I was like, hold up, watch this video.
You are a good person. You spend time with your family. You work out at the gym.
Come on, push.
You conserve water while showering. You like nice clothes. You give to charity. You recycle. You drive a Prius, but you use your bike when you can. You enjoy the occasional distraction at work. And you always send a card on Mother's Day. Always. But there's a part of you that tells yourself that you're not so good, that you could be doing more, that the world is falling apart at the seams and all you've been doing is yoga. One day, you see that the rainforest is being destroyed at a staggering rate of 32 million acres a year. That's the equivalent of 1 football field every 78 seconds. You feel bad, angry, guilty. You've been apathetic for too long. You want to do something about it. You must do something about it. Well, this is what you're not going to do.
I quit.
You're not going to quit your job, leave your family, get on the next flight to Nicaragua, take a bus to the edge of the jungle, then hoof it across rivers, lakes, and streams on a quest to the very heart of the rainforest.
Take me to the heart of the rainforest.
You're getting closer. You're almost there. You have arrived.
You're not going to ingratiate yourself with the local tribesmen, go to great lengths to earn their respect and trust.
No.
It is around now you realize you're living out the cliche gringo fantasy of becoming an honorary native and leading the resistant forces. But screw it. If they could do it, so can you.
I'm gonna save you!
This guy comes over here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pull a zafting bats right through him, right over here.
You're not going to coordinate and occupy the rainforest movement, realize it's hopeless, summon the power of the gods, lead a revolution against the deforesters and their multinational employers in an apocalyptic once-and-for-all battle to save humanity, only to awaken 2 days later in an El Salvadorian hospital with 2 toes missing on your left foot.
Siri, I wanna go home.
Hobble out of Central America, up through Mexico, across the Sierra Madre, where you break down, have your first cigarette in 4 years, accidentally start a wildfire, killing off the endangered species that once served as your occupational distraction, finally make it back home, only to find you've been replaced at work by a guy named TJ, and that things at home are not what they used to be. You're not going to do any of these things, but what you can do is follow the frog. Buying Rainforest Alliance certified products ensures the future of our rainforests, so that you don't have to do the things you shouldn't do anyway. Just follow the frog.
So the main point of it is that you don't have to be a conservation photographer to actually make a difference. Just making small changes in your daily lives, whether it's refusing plastic, taking your bike to work, that already has a lot of already evokes a lot of positive change. Next, please. If you're interested to join me, I host conservation photography workshops next year. I have slots in Tubataha. So for you divers who haven't yet gone there, I am welcoming more people to join me, and that's where I usually have my full course. Next, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noel. I mean, in these days of cameras, I mean, anybody can be a photographer, and you take enough pictures, you're going to get lucky. You get a great one every now and again. But very few people can do it consistently, and I think we just saw a masterclass there in fantastic underwater photography. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the show, as well as the sun's going down in Wonderfruit, that the mood in here is changing. These wonderful red parasols, which seem to be randomly arranged, seem to be perfectly aligned just for this setting, so you didn't have almost any light on the screen. So one question, I'm afraid. We've only got time for one question. Yes, over here, please.
Don't make it too hard.
So what is the one photo you haven't taken yet and you would like to take?
The next one.
Okay,
Always on the lookout for that next photo, of course.
Salama, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there one at the back? No. Okay. Thank you. Can I have a big round of applause for Noel?
Thank you very much.